I'm sure you've travelled to some places that are like paradise to you. For us, we've just come back from a 10-day trip to the South Island of New Zealand, and we saw some amazing places, and I got to take some amazing photos of some beautiful places. But one of the most spectacular places and awe-inspiring places that we went to was Milford Sound. Milford Sound was great. The drive-in was just as nice. And I call this place paradise. It is untouched. But when you're photographing in such a place as Milford Sound or any other location that you know you probably never go back, and you want to go home with some of the best photos that you can possibly take. At times we can capture picture postcard images like these that you see here. These are just amazing images, but at times you're going to be faced with a situation where a single image isn't going to do the place justice. Because while you're there, the weather can change, or the lighting can change. Like for us, we took a 1.5 hour boat cruise. At the start of the cruise, it was great. We were traveling with the light and I got some amazing photos. But just as we were coming back into the dock, finishing our cruise, we were taking photos of this amazing waterfall. It is just beautiful. But just after the waterfall, I noticed this image, and I know that I missed the chance of capturing this image when we first got on the cruise. And I would have had the best light. But I had two options. Either suck it up and say, well, I've lost my chance of taking an image of this place, or say, come what may, I want to go home with a photo of this scene here, of what I'm seeing. And this is what I'm going to talk about today, of whether HDR photography is the answer when you're in paradise, when you're photographing a place that you know you'll probably never go back to, or you know that you don't want to go home without capturing what your eye is seeing. Now, it's been said that gone are the days for HDR photography. Our cameras have such a wide dynamic range these days. My Z6 II has such a wide dynamic range that we don't need HDR. Well, I beg to differ. At times, you may need to shoot in HDR, in high dynamic range. And what is HDR? You're taking a series of photos, most often in odd numbers, so 3, 5, 7, whatever it takes to get the whole dynamic range of the scene you're seeing. See, we can be fooled because our eyes see everything. Our eyes are unmatched. There is no camera sensor out in the world that can match our eyesight, can match what we see in a single frame. That's a fact. So HDR photography comes in because even if your camera has a huge dynamic range, taking a HDR image when the situation allows you to get the whole dynamic range properly without inducing too much noise, too much grain into your image, because that is the gist of HDR photography. You're helping the camera take a series of images that contains the whole dynamic range or most of the dynamic range of the scene that you're photographing. So the first image on my Z6 II would be exposed for the sky, so it would be quite dark. The last image would be exposed for the shadows, which will be quite bright, and the sky would be overexposed. And the first image exposed for the sky means my shadows, the darker areas, would be pitch black. But over a series of 5 images, I was able to capture the whole dynamic range of what I'm photographing. So I want to start with showing you the single image. So this is part of the 5 sets. So this is the 3rd image, and this is the image that I base my exposure on. The meter reading was showing 0. Some of my highlights were blown, some of my shadows were blown, but my midtones were correct. The sky is not overblown, but the sun is shining here. And this was my predicament. I looked at that and I go like, when I get home, I can just cut that sun out. But I really wanted the sun in this image. And what I really wanted was right in front of me here, the dock where some smaller boats dock in, and you can see there's quite a mist because the huge waterfall just behind the mountain on the right here was just spraying water 3/4 of the frame. And this didn't help the situation. I want to show you that sometimes even using HDR can cause problems, and it will take you time to edit the image correctly. So this is the raw image. This is the best that I could do with the single image. Because I shot 5 frames, I said there's no point in me editing this single photo because I know that I will never get what I want. These are the 5 images that make up this HDR image that you will see. From top left, it's quite dark. Then as we move across from left to right, it just gets brighter. Then on the bottom row, it gets brighter again and then brighter. So here are the settings for these 5 images. 24 mils, 5 thousandths of a second. The second image was 2.5 thousandths of a second. The third image, 1250th of a second. The fourth image, 640th of a second. And the fifth image, 320th of a second. All at f8, ISO 125. I edit the images in Adobe Lightroom, and when I edit images, I've done a HDR tutorial on editing HDR image. I don't over edit the image. I don't edit a HDR image the same way I edit a single frame. So I don't increase the shadows too much. I don't decrease the highlights too much. I try to keep the image fairly standard. I still edit the image, but not as much as a single image. And you have to remember this when you're doing HDR images. And I use Photomatic Pro 6 for blending my HDR images. Adobe Lightroom has a feature in there that you can blend HDR images, but I found it very unreliable. So for myself, I prefer to use Photomatic Pro. And this is what Photomatic Pro gave me, has a blended image. If I look at the difference between this image that Photomatic Pro gave me and the single frame image, you will see there is a big difference. So once the image was back into Adobe Lightroom, I exported the image into Photoshop, and here I use Content Aware to remove everything that I didn't want, anything that was of a distraction to my image that I wanted. I brought the image back into Adobe Lightroom and did the final touch-up. I added some mask to give it a bit more vibrance to the image. Then I looked at the image and I didn't like the way the sun was displaying in the image. So I exported the image back into Adobe Photoshop, and this is what I ended up with. The sun is bright, it's shining, it's looking like a real sun. It's not overblown. I feel that this image looks so much better than this here. And this is the final touch-up that I did. Then I just added a frame around the image, and this is the image that I will be displaying on my social media accounts. Let's now see the difference between the single image and the HDR image edited. So on the top left, this is the raw file. Top right is the edited raw file, and in the center and the bottom is my HDR image. You can see that I've been able to get the correct exposure for the sky and get most of the shadows that would have been quite dark exposed. I didn't go overboard, and this is why so many people don't like HDR photography, because they see examples where people have gone overboard. They've over-processed the image when they've blended a set of images into a HDR image. None of the slides that I used, the contrast, sharpness, was overdone. I've kept it realistic, and this is what you have to remember when you're dealing with HDR images. I'm very happy with this. Sure, it's not the same image that I would have gotten in the morning, but I'm still very happy that I got a photo of this area that I'm pretty sure I will never go back to. But at times, even HDR photography will not save you. This was even a harder image to process. This is another of the major waterfalls in Milford Sound, and the area was beautiful, but the sun was shining just to the top left of the waterfall. The waterfall was in the shade. Even though I took a 5 bracketed set of images, I wasn't able to get the image that I want. On the left is the single image edited, and on the right is the 5 bracketed images made into a HDR image. I worked on this image so much, but I realized it was a lost cause. There was nothing I could really do. So you win some, you lose some. Don't think that HDR photography is a silver bullet. There will be times where even taking a bracketed set to make the image a HDR image is not going to save you because the conditions just don't suit it. But also remember that if you don't try, if you don't take the chance, you will regret it. I took the chance. I went home with a nice image. The other set that I was hoping didn't work out. Well, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. You win some, you lose some. So thanks for watching. If you have any comments or feedback, leave it in the description below. If you found value in this video, give it a big thumbs up. Stay safe, enjoy your photography, especially HDR photography, and I'll see you next time.